Right, let's start with Man United. Probably a little bit of surprise over the weekend when the name of Wout Weghorst was sort of brought to the table. What's the latest on that deal? Are we expecting that one to probably happen now?
Yeah, I think the surprise came because he's a Burnley player who's on loan at Besiktas. But I think in one way, it's not so much of a surprise because back in the summer, Erik ten Hag was looking for a player of the profile of Wout Weghorst. They were looking at Sasa Kalajic. They were looking at Benjamin Sesko. So I don't think we should be entirely surprised. It's just that United have basically said that they've got to go into the loan market rather than bring in a permanent striker in this window and maybe weigh up their options when there's more options available in the summer. I think they're hopeful that this one can happen. It's not an easy one to do, though. It's complicated by the fact that they're not just dealing with one club. It has to be in alignment with three clubs. So they have to have an agreement with Burnley. But before that happens, Burnley have to have an agreement with Besiktas to cut short that loan. Now, Besiktas aren't just going to say, yeah, fine, take him away. He's done really well for them. 9 goals in 18 games in all competitions. And they've almost been prompted with all the speculation to release a statement because there was like talk of there's a €2.5 million compensation clause. He was going to leave the club on Tuesday. They came out and said, that's fictitious. That is not true. If this Weghorst was to leave, then we would have to be suitably compensated. And it is going to take a little bit of money for that deal to happen still. So I think what United would have to discuss with Burnley is give them enough money so that Burnley would be able to cover that compensation to Besiktas and probably get a little bit more because they know that Manchester United are after one of their players. So United hopeful. Some reports are claiming that, verbal agreements have all been agreed, but it's the information we're getting is it's still relying on Burnley and Besiktas. I think United will do all they need to do for with regard to Burnley, but the crux of it will come if Burnley and Besiktas can agree.
Yeah. Does this? I mean, obviously, I think it's going to be a loan deal until the end of the season, isn't it? Does this all sort of point to United very much focusing their main striker search to the summer window?
I think it's almost been forced upon them because last summer they spent £230 million. And I think from that moment onwards, they effectively said that in January, there's not going to be big deals because of the budget. Now, if United were to bring in a long-term target in the January transfer window, it would basically be part of the summer budget. Hence why I think they're waiting until the summer to make that big signing for that priority signing in the number 9 position, simply because the options available in the summer are going to be much more than they are just now. And I think the pricing would be slightly different if they were to go for a player in the summer or in January. And add to that, if they are going for a big name striker, the likelihood is that big name striker is already going to be at a big club, already going to be playing probably Champions League football. And they're going to be very reticent to selling a player who's very important to them mid-season, let alone to Manchester United. So I just think United are just taking a step back, getting numbers in, competition for places in as well in the short term in the form of Wout Weghorst, and then revisiting it all in the summer when they believe they'll have a better opportunity and better options to bring in who they want.
Yeah, and just in terms of the rest of this window, obviously another player linked João Felix with United is, we know he's going to Chelsea now, but a very different profile to Weghorst. Do you think is there any chance they could could look to sign another forward this window?
The information I'm getting at the moment is it looks like it's Weghorst, and that will be the striking option sorted for this month. At the start of the window, the priorities were a goalkeeper and a forward. They brought in Jack Butland already from Crystal Palace, and they're looking at Weghorst from Burnley. The only other area that's worth keeping an eye on is the right-back area. I think they are looking at all of their options with regard to who is available in the right-back area, but it will all depend, or it's likely to depend, on Aaron Wan-Bissaka and his future. We thought that potentially he could have left in the summer. We thought it was odds on he was going to leave in this transfer window with the likes of Crystal Palace wanting to bring him back to the club. But, how it's transpired following the World Cup, Diogo Dalot was injured when he came back and he was given extra time off as well. And Wan-Bissaka almost took that opportunity because he played in the first 4 games in all competitions straight after the World Cup. United kept 4 clean sheets. Eric Ten Hag was very impressed with Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and it's turned into a kind of a win-win situation for United there because they've got someone who's rejuvenated, who can be a good option as a backup to Diogo Dalot should they need him, or they've got an attractive proposition for a club who could be interested in Aaron Wan-Bissaka. As far as he's concerned, though, he'll know that he is second choice, though. It's obvious, when you look at the team selections throughout the season. But even though he did play well in those 4 games, as soon as Diogo Dalot was fully fit for that game against Everton in the FA Cup last Friday, Dalot came into the team. Wan-Bissaka went back to the bench. Last night as well, the Charlton game in the Carabao Cup, Diogo Dalot started. Did come off injured, though we were told it's just a precaution, and Wan-Bissaka came off the bench. So at the moment, he's got 2 right-backs who he can rely on. But if Wan-Bissaka starts making noises that, look, I need more regular first-team football, I'm not going to get it here, let's see if Manchester United could agree a deal with someone. But it would also depend on if they can bring someone else in as well.
Yeah, let's move on to Arsenal then. Mudryk is obviously the main person we've been talking about this month. Do we think we're getting any closer to this one? Obviously, a little bit of sort of speculation. They may have had positive talks this week. Do we think we're getting any closer to a solution here?
Well, I mean, he now is with the Shakhtar squad in Turkey for a mid-season training camp. And, I was asked the question yesterday on our transfer show whether that means that, is the move in doubt? Well, not really, because there's no agreement yet. And he's contractually obligated to Shakhtar Donetsk. So he has to abide by those obligations, one of which is, yes, is a mid-season training camp. You're still part of this squad. You've got to come with us. No problem. I think what's happening at the moment is Arsenal and Shakhtar are still discussing that fee. Now, Shakhtar's valuation, we understand, is around £85 million plus. They seem to be comparing that price to, players like Jack Grealish and Anthony and the amount they went for. Whereas I think Arsenal are probably looking more at, well, Cody Gakpo went to Liverpool from PSV, all in for about £45 million. That's probably our starting point. So there's a big gap there. I think Arsenal and Shakhtar are talking to see if they can come up with a compromise. The information that I'm getting is it's coming down to the structure of the deal. So how much Arsenal would be willing to pay up front, how much in performance-related add-ons and incentives, and how realistic and achievable, as far as Shakhtar are concerned, those conditions will be. So I think talks are continuing. There's no secret that the player himself wants to go to Arsenal. Just have a look at his social media feed. He was showing pictures of him watching the West Ham game against Arsenal, the Brighton game against Arsenal. He was liking posts when he was... there was a picture of him behind bars and there was a hashtag free Mudryk from an Arsenal fan site, and he liked the post. There was a Q&A with him the other day where someone put the question to him, why don't you come to Chelsea, and he just replied no with a heart emoji. So I think he's got his heart set on going to Arsenal, but it's all going to depend, as it always does, on whether the two clubs can come up with an agreement. Make no mistake about it, though, Mikel Arteta, they want to back him. The board have always wanted to back him since he became the long-term project at Arsenal, and they'll continue to back him in this transfer window. And what better way to show it than to bring in someone like Mykhailo Mudryk, one of the best young talents in European football, at a time when unexpectedly Arsenal are challenging for the title.
Yeah. Obviously, they were another club reportedly in for João Felix, weren't they? As well as Mudryk, I think were the reports. Are we expecting more business from them, even if they do get this Mudryk deal sorted?
I think Mikel Arteta wants to be busy in the window. I think the focus is on Mudryk. I know a lot of Arsenal fans are crying out for another central midfielder. But like I was saying with the issues with Manchester United trying to do business in January and in the summer, if Arsenal were to get Mudryk and, meeting Shakhtar's valuation, that's a huge outlay in a January transfer window. So maybe another big signing, they might wait until the summer if they want to strengthen in that position, particularly, as I mentioned before, the options that they'll have will be a lot greater. And add to that, players who want to move in the summer, big players, Arsenal could then go to them in the summer and say, look, not only can we give you this much in wages, Premier League football, great training ground, great stadium, but when you walk out at the Emirates on a Tuesday or Wednesday night, that Champions League music's going to be blaring out. So I think Arsenal, if they can almost guarantee that Champions League football, they'll be shopping in a different market again in the summer, I think.
Yeah. Just wanted to ask if there's any update on potential exits. So I think we heard a little bit about Cedric Suarez sort of coming into the window. Is there anything more on that one or any other potential exits at Arsenal?
Yeah, still trying to get a bit of more information on this. He's not featuring really in Arsenal's games of late. And I know Fulham were interested in him. The information that I was getting on that one was, yes, the interest was there, but not at the terms and the wages being quoted to them. So I just wonder if Cedric Suarez continues not to feature in the squads for Arsenal towards the end of the window. Fulham may then try their luck again and just say, look, let's take him on loan, or let's try and do a deal where we pay a portion of his wages because we want to bring him in. With regard to Fulham, I think it might have been slightly different with regard to their hunt for players. Had they done what many people predicted they were going to do at the start of the season and struggle, and they simply haven't. So there hasn't been that real urgency to think we have to bring these players in. They want to be busy. They want to back Marco Silva. Marco Silva is saying all the right things. So we want to bring 2 or 3 players in. It's always difficult to do business in any transfer window, let alone the January transfer window. But it might be something that Fulham try and do later on in the window. We're already, 11 days into this window now. So maybe they'll just play a game of jeopardy with certain players that they're interested in, and to try and bring the price down, to try and bring wages down if they're trying to bring these players out on loan.
Yeah. Let's move on to Chelsea. Looks like it's going to be a bit of a mad transfer window for them. Obviously, João Felix looks like he's going to be the next one in. How many more additions are we expecting from them potentially?
They want to be busy as well, purely because this is Graham Potter's first transfer window. And I think the owners are aware that even though things aren't going that great on the pitch for Graham Potter, when you hire Graham Potter, you are hiring a long-term project, because that's what he's based his career on. He got that job on the back of what he did at Brighton. And what he did at Brighton was buying players at low cost, developing those players, and then selling them on at a bigger fee. Of course, that's not going to be the strategy at Chelsea so much as it was at Brighton, because Chelsea are in a different stratosphere with regard to finances. So they can go out and spend that big money on the finished article. But I still think that Graham Potter will want to bring in young players, however much they cost, to develop them so that he can put his stamp on that team. Because I think there's a little bit of sympathy for Graham Potter. I know that he's at a club where they can spend what they want, but he joined a club who had spent £270 million in a transfer window, and he had nothing to do with those signings. He came in after the transfer window closed. The manager who was in situ when all these players were bought was Thomas Tuchel, and he lost his job soon after. So I think they want to back him, because it would have been pointless hiring him if you're not going to give him that opportunity of at least 1 or 2 transfer windows, particularly a summer one. And I think all the noises we're getting from Chelsea is that they are going to back Graham Potter and give him that time to develop. Now, the big one that was at the start of this window has kind of gone quiet at the moment, but you can't rule it out, is the Enzo Fernandez situation. Will Chelsea go back in for him? Well, it's simple as far as Benfica are concerned at this moment in time, and that is he's got a release clause. So pay the 120 million release clause, and we can't do anything about it. You're free to talk to Enzo Fernandez, because Benfica aren't under pressure to sell him or negotiate that release clause, because he's still under contract. He's only been there for, half a year. They want him to stay at the club. And, they were quite public about how narked they were, for want of a better word, with Chelsea's approach, because they felt Chelsea came into the negotiation saying they were going to meet the release clause. And once they've done that, Enzo Fernandez's head, unsurprisingly, is going to be turned. It's a Premier League move. He's just come off the back of a World Cup win. And then what Benfica are accusing Chelsea of is that once the head is turned, they've come in and thought, right, Enzo Fernandez wants to join, don't actually want to pay the full release clause. Let's try and negotiate. Benfica weren't having it. They said, no, that is not the way we're going to do this deal, because as it stands, he has a release clause. Meet the release clause. Simple as that. And since then, Fernandez has had a few issues. He's been dropped for a game. He tried to make peace with the club. You know, there's a couple of social media posts of him watching the game in the stadium. Back in training now. I just don't think that the people that I'm speaking to in Portugal who've got close links with Benfica are telling me, look, that this one doesn't feel like it's over, simply because his head was turned so much earlier on in the window.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, do we think he wants this move? Because I'm sure you've seen the goal celebration last night, where he's sort of pumping the badge and saying that he's sort of suggesting that he's staying. Is
Yeah,
that sort of just trying to sort of make peace with the fans, do you think? Or do you think or does he
it
want
could be a
this
bit of
move?
both. It could be one of those situations where he'll just knuckle down and say, right, I'll just see out the season at least and see what happens in the summer. Don't forget, Benfica are in the Champions League. They're in the round of 16. They've got Bruges in the last 16. So both of those teams will feel that they've got a big chance of qualifying for the quarterfinals of the Champions League. And, you know, they finished top of their group. That was a group that had Paris Saint-Germain in the group, and they finished top of that group. So as far as Benfica are concerned, they don't want to sell and do anything mid-season, but they know that if someone comes in with that release clause, then, you know, so be it. What Benfica would want to do, and whether they'll be able to do that, and whether Fernandez and his representation will agree to do that is another matter, is probably renegotiate Enzo Fernandez's contract and give him just a bit more money for now, but in exchange, raise the release clause, because they'll probably feel come the summer, there'll be more clubs after him who will be willing to go higher. And if they put the release clause a little bit higher, then so be it. If the release clause stays the same, they can't get a bidding war, because they could get 4 clubs meeting the release clause, and then it's up to the player. Whereas if they raise the release clause, at least they'll think we can make a little bit more profit on a player who is just like, I mean, it's been incredible, the rise, hasn't it? Not many people were talking about him. And I know he played well in the Champions League in the first half of the season, but he really came to the fore in the World Cup winner, the young player of the tournament. And I just think Benfica know what they've got. And yes, 120 million is a lot of money, but they probably think that they can go probably higher on that.
Yeah. As people to Liverpool, obviously we know they want Bellingham in the summer, don't we? But you know, still links with the likes of Moises Caicedo, Mateus Nunes as well recently. Does this all point to the fact that they do want maybe more than just Bellingham in
But
terms of that area?
potentially, I think they're looking to probably bring in 1 or 2 midfielders. We've seen the profile of midfielders that Liverpool have got, and we've spoken about it on here before. You know, that there's a batch of them who are in their early 30s or approaching 30, and then there's a batch of them who are really, really young, teenagers and early 20s. And then you've got maybe Naby Keita, whose future looks uncertain, to say the least, with regard to Liverpool, who's in that bracket in, you know, peak years, you'd say, you know, 26, 27, 28. So I just think Liverpool will want to bring in 1 or 2. They are scouring the market, make no mistake about it. It looks like the number 1 choice is Jude Bellingham, but there has been an interest in Moises Caicedo as well. That's definitely one to keep an eye on. Not sure it would be in this transfer window or whether it will be in the summer, because Brighton don't want to sell mid-season. Brighton have got their own ambitions, remember. They probably feel that they can get into the European places, which would be an incredible achievement for them this season. And Caicedo's actually spoken about that. Yes, we're playing very, very well, and we've got a chance of qualifying for Europe. McAllister is another one at Brighton. I think Brighton's main focus in this window, yes, they want to strengthen, but probably keeping the likes of those players like Caicedo and McAllister. But Liverpool will be looking at him. Chelsea, unsurprisingly, will be looking at him. He knows the management and the hierarchy very, very well. They're the ones who brought him into the club, who developed him at Brighton in Graham Potter and the a sporting director now at Chelsea. And then the other name that you mentioned as well was
Mateus Nunes.
Mateus Nunes. Yeah, this is an interesting one because I think there was interest in the summer from Liverpool, and it looked like he might have been joining Liverpool, and then it just didn't materialise. And then Wolves nicked him, brought him in, and then he's hardly played for Wolves, but showing enough for Liverpool to retain that interest because they've obviously done a lot of scouting on the player up until the point that he went to Wolves. So why wouldn't there still be that interest? So the Bellingham one is the interesting one for me, though, because a lot of people have been saying, will Liverpool be able to afford him? His price is going to go through the roof because he's still got 2 years left on his contract. It won't just be Liverpool going for him, Manchester City and Real Madrid. I just think you need to look at the will of the player as well. Borussia Dortmund can say, we are not selling unless, for example, we get 120 million pounds for him. Just say, for example, that was their price. If Liverpool don't want to pay that much, but the other two clubs do, Dortmund could say, right, we're going to accept the bid from Manchester City or PSG or Real Madrid. But if the will of the player is to say, I don't want to go, I only want to go to Liverpool, for example, I think that changes everything. Only because he's got 2 years left on his contract, Dortmund then have a decision to make. Because if he says, I'll stay at Dortmund or I'll go to Liverpool, it's one or the other, then Dortmund will say, brilliant, you're going to stay. But he's not going to sign a new contract. So by the time he'll go to Liverpool come January after or the summer after, he'll have 18 months or 12 months left on his contract. And Liverpool then will say, with that amount left on his contract, it's not 120 million pounds anymore. So would Dortmund be almost forced into accepting something lower than the valuation if the player decides he only wants to go to one club? I think there's more to it than just simply saying Dortmund want this much money, and if it's not met, he's not going, because the will of the player is going to play a part in this, I think.
Yeah, let's move on to West Ham. What's the latest on Craig Dawson's future there?
Bit of deja vu with this one, isn't it? Wolves are interested in signing Craig Dawson on a permanent deal. He's only got 6 months left on his contract. If you go back to the summer, they thought they got him on deadline day, but it was dependent on West Ham United bringing in Jan Bednarek, I think it was, from Southampton. And if all those pieces fell into place, he was free to go to Wolves, because West Ham were quite understanding that he's still commuting from the Midlands. He lives in the Midlands. He wanted to be nearer to home and his family. But Jan Bednarek ended up going to Aston Villa. And then West Ham decided, look, Nea Faged is injured. Kurt Zuma's had a few injury problems. Ogbonna's coming back from injury. We can't afford to let Dawson go. Hence, Dawson stayed at the club. West Ham's injury problems have eased a little bit since then. That's why they're open, I think, to allowing Dawson to leave. But I still think West Ham would want to bring in a replacement for Craig Dawson before allowing him to leave. And be interesting to see. I mean, this is just me throwing it out there. I'm not sure Jan Bednarek's getting much match time at Aston Villa. If West Ham United were in for Bednarek in the summer, I just wonder whether they'll revisit that one, and the deal that potentially could have got done in the summer with Bednarek going to West Ham and Dawson going to Wolves, could that then materialise again? Trust me, though, this is not on any information at all. I'm just throwing it out there. But West Ham do want a replacement, I think, before they allow Dawson to go, but they're open to it.
Yeah, one club that looks like is going to be busy this window and already has been is Southampton. I think striker looks to be the key position for them. Nicolas Jackson, do we think there's interest in him from them?
Yeah, Nicolas Jackson is one of the options that they're looking at. I think they want to back Nathan Jones, new manager, first transfer window, and it's almost necessity now as well, because Southampton are in trouble. They are in big trouble at the bottom of the Premier League, and they probably think that reinforcements are going to be needed if they're going to get out of this mess. But it's interesting to see that the signings that they've made in the summer and probably be looking to make in January are signings for the future of the club as well. So maybe are they almost making signings as well, legislating for the potential of a relegation? They've still got good young players in there who are attractive to other clubs and who would go for much, much more than Southampton bought them for. But they've also got players who are young enough, who are under a young manager, a good football club where they can probably develop as well. So, Southampton in the league, not in a great position. As a club, they look like they're in a good position. I think Nicolas Jackson would be one of those players that not only would they look at, yes, he can help us in the future, but in the short term as well. Could his goals, could his performances help Southampton get out of that bottom three and just save themselves from relegation? It's not been the greatest start for him in the Premier League, but look, they won the FA Cup game. Not many people were expecting that when they went to Crystal Palace and won that match 2-1. And they're in the quarterfinals of the Carabao Cup as we record this. Let's see if they qualify. Nice easy game against Manchester City at St Mary's to come. But they'll have competition for Jackson as well, because I think there are a couple of other unnamed Premier League clubs who are interested in him. One contact told me that maybe Aston Villa would be interested as well. You can see the sense in that simply because Unai Emery managed him at Villarreal. Would he want to be reunited with him again at Villa Park?
Yeah, right, let's finish up on Tottenham. Pedro Porro, obviously we're hearing a lot about him. Is he sort of emerging as maybe the top right wing back target this month?
It looks like the primary target. Antonio Conte will be backed in this transfer window by the board. They know that they have to. And he's got a bit of currency as well, because last January, he and Fabio Paratici combined to bring in Rodrigo Bentancur and Dejan Kulusevski. They ended up being transformative signings for Tottenham because they went from being Champions League contenders to ending up in the top four and in this season's Champions League. Once again, they find themselves outside those Champions League places while they're in a January transfer window. If they can bring two signings in and hope they can be as transformative as Kulusevski and Bentancur were last January, don't rule out Tottenham making a late run for the top four. The primary target, it looks like, is Pedro Porro from Sporting Lisbon. He's got 2.5 years left on his contract. And, rather like the situation with Enzo Fernandez, but on a smaller scale, we think that Sporting Lisbon won't want to do any business on Pedro Porro unless the release clause is met. And that's around £36 million. Because they've got 2.5 years left on his contract, they've got a little bit of breathing space on this, that they don't need to negotiate that release clause just yet. The further down it goes in his contract, the more dangerous it becomes for Sporting Lisbon. But as it stands now, in a January transfer window with 2.5 years left, they can still afford to ask for that release clause. And the information that I'm getting from contacts out in Lisbon, from people who are connected with Sporting Lisbon, they're telling me that Sporting won't do business unless the release clause is met.